Traditionally, you go in here and pitch a Cinco around, a little creature bait, looking for these spawning fish, and it's really time consuming. And when you're looking around for them and you're trying to find these little hard spots on these flats that these fish stay on, especially when it's not really high bluebird sunny skies, where you got to cover a lot of water to find a group of fish, this jerkbait right here is the deal. Traditionally, these fish have seen so many vertical presentations, and especially after a cold front and a lot of pressure, I think they really get used to seeing a lot of these different baits. And being able to take this little jerkbait around these little isolated pieces of cover and twitching it down and just letting it sit in their face long enough, they almost have no other choice but to just bite it. It's definitely not the traditional way to throw a jerkbait, but in a case like this where we've got such thick cover and we're fishing for some big South Florida bass, I go a straight braid with a nice limber rod, and what that does is allow me to put some heat on these fish if I absolutely have to, but that nice soft rod allows these fish to stay hooked. You know, I'm used to up north, Minnesota smallmouth fishing, 10-pound fluorocarbon, 6-8 rods. Man, do they eat that thing. But in a case like this, where you're fishing for, at any moment, get a 7 to 10-pound plus bite, and you're around thick cover, going with 40, 50-pound braid, even depending upon how deep the water is. In this case, we've got 40-pound on. We're fishing in about 3-4 foot of water. I've done it in the past where you're around 1.5 foot, 2 foot max, and then I just up my line size. And if the water's really, really clear, what I'll do as well is I'll tie on just a little small section of 20-pound mono. And what that does is help that bait sit there. And then if they get a little line shy, you don't have to worry about them seeing it as bad. So with either a suspending or floating jerkbait, you can kind of determine the running depth of these baits by your rod. So if it's a little bit deeper, I find a little bit of a trough. Sometimes I point my rod down and get it a little bit deeper in the water column. And then in particular cases, you know, that braided line floats. So most braided lines on the market float. And what that does is help position that bait on these shallow flats a little higher in the water column, so you're not down there dredging the bottom. You can twitch your rod down to keep that bait a little bit deeper, but if you get into a position where, like I said, it shallows up, you can just make little twitches with your rod in the air, and what it's going to do is try to keep that bait up right off the bottom. We've got dead cattails, we've got floating vegetation, we've got all sorts of just different pieces and particles that follow the bottom, and trying to keep those treble hooks clean is going to be key. There's one. See that I had my rod tip up. We moved into some really shallow water here. Just little twitches. It's not a big one, but this time of year, if you're around little bucks, you are definitely around the big girls. Treble hook baits in a place you definitely wouldn't think. Look at that thing. It's pissing, ready for the spawn. Get this weather right and the big ones will be in no time. Not a bad one. I can tell you right now, after the time we put in the water this week, I would definitely take a limit of those. I think it'd go a long way. It might even catch you a check.